Hello friends, my name is Keisha, and I'm a proud member of the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan. I'm also a survivor of human trafficking. My trafficking began in Canada and crossed into the United States. I was stalked, hunted, and ignored by the very systems that were meant to protect me. This is why, with my father, Dale Richardson, we started the CARES Project, an Indigenous survivor-led movement for humanity. We are dedicated to exposing human trafficking, government corruption, and holding institutions accountable. The judicial branch is broken. It has failed to restrain the evils that have come upon this republic. Whether it's family court failures, weaponization of the judiciary, COVID-era harms, or human trafficking, the courts have allowed these issues to continue unchecked for too long. One of the most powerful tools we're using is the petition for redress of grievances. These are lawful constitutional actions rooted in the founding principles of this country. On May 19, 2026, a formal petition for redress of grievances was submitted to the United States Congress. This petition is demanding that Congress and the President use the powers under Article 4, Section 4 to preserve this Republican form of government by restraining these abuses pending congressional investigation. Through the CARES Project Action Plan, we are mobilizing people across the United States to strengthen this effort. This petition has been created as a template. If you or someone you love have been hurt by these same systemic failures in the courts or by government institutions, your evidence matters. When you come forward, please bring your evidence along with a copy of the petition for redress of grievances. This helps connect your story to this growing constitutional record being placed before Congress. We are asking you to stand with us. Join the CARES Project Action Plan and help us build a precedent that demands accountability and protects the God-given rights of American families. Our united voices will compel Congress to uphold the Constitution and safeguard our liberties. United we stand, one nation under God. I will close with my favorite quote. The greatest want of the world is the want of men. Men who will not be bought or sold. Men who in their inmost souls are true and honest. Men who do not fear to call sin by its right name. Men whose conscience is as true to duty as the needle to the pole. Men who will stand for the right, though the heavens may fall. Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the CARES Project podcast. Today we have with us again Peyman, Askari, and JP Berg. And I have them mixed up earlier, so I have to change your things. But please introduce yourself to our show again.
I guess I'll go. Hi, my name is Peyman Askari. I host a podcast with JP Berg, and just like yourself, Dale, we're trying to figure out how to save this country.
Yes, and JP.
And my name's JP. I do a podcast with Peyman. We do it Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern, called Politics with Peyman and JP. And again, we're trying to make sense of a very mad world.
All right, so today we're kind of talking about some of the issues with Canada and where we're at with the lack of doing anything constructive. Like, it seems like there's a fire going on. Everybody sees the fire. Everybody's saying something for the fire about the fire and saying, look, there's a fire, but nobody's picking up a bucket of water to put it out. That's pretty much what? Go ahead.
No, I thought you wanted. Me to follow up on that.
Yeah, go ahead, for sure.
No, it is to continue in your analogy. It's like people are picking up thimbles of water and they're splashing a little over here and a little over there, and they're taking a break. But we're not in a concerted manner. Are we doing anything that's going to save the country? And yes, it is good for everyone to get involved in any way you can. But if you're not using your energy effectively, you're going to burn out. So that's the issue we're running into.
So to stick with the analogy, I would say the house is on fire And instead of getting out of the house, we're all standing in the house arguing with one another. We've factionalized. There's various groups, like based upon virtually every metric, we've been factionalized. And we're to the point now where there's ethno-nationalist groups. The left and the right divide is bigger than ever. They're playing the indigenous off against Canadians. They're playing the immigrants off against Canadians. And until we can get some solidarity, I don't think we'll actually see any pragmatic resolution.
Actually touching on that, one of the things when you're talking about the divisions in this whole tribalism, whether it's race, party, whatever the case is, you're seeing people getting marginalized that definitely need to be, that definitely will help the cause. Because I was just actually talking with Anthony about this before we got on this podcast. And for example, the Democrats, they reported some election fraud issues. If you look at some of their primaries, like one notable one was Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, somebody actually took it to court about that because they totally threw them under the bus, and they used a lot of the same things that people are complaining about today with election issues. So you have to understand that everybody's being affected by all of these issues. And when we have these tribalist mentalities, you're going to separate the people and not get the issues dealt with, because election fraud, for example, affects Democrats and Republicans equally. Because if you don't get the people that you want, that the majority of the people want, regardless of whether you like it or not, you're destroying the system. The same thing happens with the Republicans, but if you keep them divided, then those guys won't come together to fix the issue, right? It's kind of like the same thing that's going on here. Go ahead.
No, I guess it is. People have gone through a lot of trauma in the last 6 years since COVID started, and there has been no justice. Like, we've seen no perp walks. We've been massively disrespected by the court system. The tribunals they're just a kangaroo court. Law enforcement is no longer on our side. So there's this sense that we're losing control. So that this concept of democracy that everyone, maybe not everyone can define it perfectly, but we have an understanding of what it roughly should be. It's not that anymore. And people are really angry. And we are being pushed in this direction where naturally people are saying it's just us versus them. Like, people are starting to identify the state as the enemy. It takes a little while to shed the propaganda of the last few decades, like climate change, LGBTQ, but we'll get there.
Well, I just want to kind of touch on something. The issue that we're having is that people aren't. There are things that people can do, they just refusing to do it, or they don't like certain people. And you watch this happening all the time. Well, I don't like this guy, or I don't like this woman, so I'm not going to deal with them, but I'll burn the country down rather than getting the necessary things that we need, because if we don't do all the things that everybody's doing and do it in a coordinated manner, we're cooked, right? This idea of people have to put away their egos and their pride. It's really all there is to it. Because if you continue with that path, we'll never get anything done.
Well, people have to put away their tribalism, right? They have tribal loyalties. They're conceptualizing our issues through the narrow lens of one perspective, and they've hyperfixated either on immigration, or they've hyperfixated on the economy, or the property rights divisions with the indigenous Canadians. Like, it's masterfully laid out and being implemented, all these various division ops. And that's the biggest hurdle we have, is our own proclivity for tribalism. And we have to stop interpreting our neighbors as the causation of the societal ills and our enemies, right? Like, they're not an out group, they're your neighbors. And we got to get past a lot of this division if we have a hope. I'm firmly there. If we don't find solidarity on some of the most pertinent issues, like our institutions and the integrity of them, then we will lose for sure.
When you're talking about all the stuff with the courts and so forth, the courts are designed for people to get help. It's designed so that you could restrain the government. Even during the times, if you went to the UK, people could restrain the king in the courts if he wasn't following the law. And the deterrent that they had was that the barons that were there, if they didn't agree with what the kings were doing, too bad, because they've had told kings that if you don't change your course, we're going to rip you off the throne and put someone else on. And that threat of accountability is what is necessary for something to function. We're not seeing that here. This is our problem, because you go to the courts, and what do the courts do? They drag you there through lawfare. They let the criminals onto the street. You say something to hurt someone's feelings, and then you're in prison, right?
If I can jump in, JP. Dale, what you're describing is a sort of a tension. And I was talking to a gentleman whose name escapes me at the moment, but he's sort of a constitutional expert. And he said the English system, it was designed in such a way that it had corrective mechanisms. And roughly every, I don't know, let's say 150 years, those mechanisms kick in and you get a correction. But the way that they've gamed the system now, those mechanisms, they don't really operate anymore. This is a fancy way of me saying they've taken, whoever the powers be, that's called the state, have taken over the courts. They've taken over the adjudicating body that's supposed to discipline the courts. They've taken over the prosecutors. The prosecutors are worried about becoming a judge one day and getting that raised. They've taken over the law enforcement. Back once upon a time, we had this thing called obstruction of justice. That's fallen to the wayside, and that's the people don't understand this, but they feel the effects of this.
Yes, I agree with you. The problem is that a lot of those things that they put in place are not what's supposed to be done. For example, like the judicial, like the Canadian Judicial Council, it's an offense to any type of free society, because you're basically having the fox guarding the hen house. Like, you're basically going to the judges and saying, please convict yourselves for doing wrong. That's never going to happen. That's not the way that works. The way that it's supposed to work is that the other two branches are the ones to restrain that branch, right? Because we know that you go into court theoretically, and the government's doing something wrong, and theoretically, the way it's supposed to operate is that the judge could place an order to restrain that, and then because of that, then the executive, which is the law enforcement, would go in and restrain them if necessary. And if they decided to go too far, they would drag them out in handcuffs. So you have the two branches restraining the other branches. So one other branch. So the same thing applies here, but this is not happening. And what actually drives the politics, and I know this is going to be unpopular, but I'm going to say it anyway. What the idea of when women came into politics fundamentally changed. And the reason being is when a man sees another man that's strange, the threat for like death is on the table, because if something goes sideways, it goes to deadly force. Women do not operate the same way with each other. They don't. This is why men sometimes wonder why women say things, because if two men said that to each other, somebody would be lying on the floor and one would be getting up, right? So when you take that sort of different element into the politics, it changed the way that it works, because a lot of the times you get 100 angry men and you're going to tell, like, if men are responsible for their families and everything else like this, if you come and mess with them, things will go sideways very fast, because you're not going to take it, because you're like, I got to look after my wife and my kids. But that's no longer the case. So that's changed. And this is how politics has shifted, because governments came because people had to come together to protect themselves against bad men that were criminal. And that's really how government started. It's all about.
So just to go back to your initial point about the balance of power and the various aspects of the government watching each other, that's kind of the premise of it. Even in a monarchical system, the king is supposed to be able to intercede and prevent legislation from being passed that goes against natural law. Like, they're all supposed to have levers to influence things, right? Like it's supposed to be balanced, but it's not. The institutions have been subverted. In Canada specifically, we have a situation where our Senate and our judiciary has been stacked, not with people that are looking to have, you know, a modicum of impartiality interpreting the law. They're radical activists. They're looking to enforce an orthodoxy through the legislative apparatus. So I mean, that's a huge problem to overcome.
Well, and this is why the legislative branch, and it goes for any type of democratic society, the legislative branch is the branch that has the most power. It is what represents the will of the people. The legislative is the will, the executive is the sword, and then the judicial system is judgment. Those are the only things that they have in there. And so the sword is held by the legislative branch, which is the will of the people. So they have to be elected officials and so forth that have the highest authority to direct those things. And then the judges, they're not on the same thing, but we have to have those power, understand the way those powers work. And the elected officials are the ones who change this. And we have people coming out, for example, like Daniel Smith says, "Oh, I can't get involved in the court cases." Well, nobody's asking you to. You're supposed to fix the judicial process that's operating in your province according to the Constitution. She can't. She's refusing to do so.
Let me go, JP. I have a theory about Danielle Smith. Now I don't think she's being sincere, but the argument being made is we can't have another NDP government, and this is being held over the heads of the people, the voters, the UCP base. And Bruce Party recently said like he would really like to see the separatists, the independence movement, come out and say, no, this is happening. We're leaving. You can either come with us or you can split the vote. But that'll never happen. One thing I just wanted to add, we can go back to your male female argument in a moment, but these criticisms we're making of the courts, it doesn't always have to be some sort of conspiracy in a smoke-filled room of mustached men who come up with how to hijack the judiciary. It could be something as simple as the judge has gone through law school and the judge has been taught that government is always right. So when the government puts out an expert, the judge gives that expert greater weight than he would to if I cited you, Dale Richardson, as an expert. So these things also they pervert the judicial system, but they nudge it in a more authoritarian direction.
Well, that's also a product of the nepotism that they have in this country that is absolutely disgusting, because they wash somebody's hands. They give you this position for life. You've got a cushy position. And when they want something, guess what? You're going to have to rule in their favor. That's where a lot of it works.
I look at it as the institutions were subverted in some regard. Not that all of the people that are playing the game are, nefarious players.
Oh.
But when the corruption is there, when it's systemic, they don't get the appointments if they're not willing to play ball.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm saying? And even with our parliament, with members of parliament, like if you want to represent your constituency, that's not allowed. You have to go along with the party orthodoxy. And I think with the law system, it's very similar too. Like if you're a crown prosecutor and you want an appointment to be a judge or something, you have to play ball with certain things. Like there's an agenda that they're kind of incentivized. So they've perverted the incentive structure, and it's ensuring that the people with the least amount of integrity seem to succeed in these institutions. And therein lies one of our problems.
Well, and I was looking at a lot of the Commonwealth countries and the guys who basically set up the Commonwealth countries, like, for example, Australia, New Zealand, here in Canada, and so forth. A lot of them had a lot of the same ideas as the Americans, because the Americans got a lot of their ideas from the British system. They just removed the king and put checks and balances in there to make sure that the problems didn't happen again, but they, in part, use a lot of the same things. Like their legal process is pretty much the same. Obviously, there's some slight differences, but for most part, it's pretty similar to any Western country. For example, any any Commonwealth country, right? Very similar crossover. So they all understood the way the branches of government work. They all did. And they all said the same things, in part, in for the most part. And they also said that public pressure is the most effective tool, because everybody knows that people only govern but they only govern with the consent of the people. Because throughout history, whenever people got fed up, they revolted, right? Went too far and they were just like, no, we're done. We don't care. And that's what happened. So if the people don't consent, then these people don't rule and they don't get away with it. The people are still consenting to this because they don't want to face what needs to be done.
Oh, I'm going through a lot of the civil court and tribunal cases right now.
Yeah.
And I'm coming to the conclusion that, Canada and America are very different countries. And that's not just because they have some First Amendment, Second Amendment, makes some, minor differences. I think that the First Amendment specifically turns America into a republic. So it walls. It's a constitutional republic. It's putting checks and balances on the government, but it's walling off an entire domain that the government is not allowed to ever enter into. Whereas in Canada, we are a democracy. Parliamentary supremacy basically just means the government can do whatever it wants. We don't have those same constitutional checks and balances. And this isn't a minor thing. If you think it's a minor thing, look what's happening in these courts.
This is okay. It's not quite as bad as you think it is. It is bad. It is as bad because of this. Americans had citizens that were sovereign, that they were, they had rights and articulated that their rights came from God. The Canadian mindset is that we were subjects, right? And a subject and a citizen are two very fundamentally different ideas. And the subjects are supposed to just bend to the will of the king, which is the way that our country is designed. But even so, there are checks and balances. They just have not set them up, even according to the Constitution. I would go back and challenge every person to go back and read the 1867 Constitution Act. Read it and understand it. And then read some of the subsequent Constitution Acts that actually were never necessarily inserted into there, but they're referenced in there as part of the Constitution. Now, when you go back and begin to read it and look at the way that our government is structured and the way the government is operating, there are two very fundamentally different things. And then some of the stuff now where they use the charter as if the charter is the only portion of the Constitution, that's wrong, because there's a division of powers that is clearly laid out in the 1867 that's not being done, and people are allowing it to happen.
So honestly, I have a couple of points. A system is only good as its constituent elements. So when we have bad people of ill morals or no morals virtually in this current system, you're going to see a reflection of that in any system. So we could be under a monarchical structure, we could be under a democratic structure or a constitutional republic. If the people at the helm of these institutions aren't of high moral repute, then it's not going to matter. They will find a way to subvert it and do the will of power or use it for their own advantage. I'm a firm believer that there's a supranational system above the government, just to take it there. I can't help myself. But I think they inform our policies, and I think in a lot of cases they control our public servants like puppets, essentially, as if it's all just a performative charade to provide the illusion of participatory governance. But to go back briefly to what you were touching on, Dale, there is a dynamic between the people and a ruling class. This is unspoken. It's a perpetual reciprocal dynamic that exists. And even the most historically oppressed or the most historically subservient populations will inevitably reach a point where they've had enough. And when they reach that point, that's when you see real change. That's when that will ensue. And I think it'll happen rather organically. What will it take for Canadians or Westerners to reach that point? That's a whole nother discussion.
Yes. And one thing I will add, the Canadian Prime Minister, the government, I agree, has too much power. They give them too much power. For example, how the prime minister has been able to prorogue the government whenever there was issues that was unfavorable to him. This is literally something that was listed as one of the causes that impelled separation in the Declaration of Independence, because the king would dissolve the government whenever things he didn't like happened, and he would just disband it, just like how Justin Trudeau was proroguing the government. If you look at what, if anybody goes back and reads that, in principle, we're watching every element of what they said was the reason why he needed to break the yoke is happening now. So that tells us that we're at a very bad point in our history, and something has to be done. But the problem is that for every movement that goes forward, they're always going to have to be the ones that step forward first, and those ones are the ones who often pay the price. And everyone's afraid to do it. Most people are.
So I get the sense, I actually know you well enough, Dale, to know that you don't like when the show is just about like a complaining instead of offering solutions.
Yeah.
So I would say, you know, one really important means of us getting out of this mess that we are in, and this isn't something simple. It's not short term, but it's educating ourselves. Well, what I mean by that is, you know, understanding exactly how the court systems are being subverted. Just by listening to other lawyers who've gone through this and can tell you this is how the procedure becomes the punishment. This is how the judges let corrupt lawyers and police officers off. I think that's one way. Now it's not short term. It's easier said than done, but I think that is a necessary condition to get ourselves out of this mess.
Yes, education, I agree, is necessary. We also have to have action along with the education. The people who know need to do more. There's not enough of this happening. And for example, like my daughter at the beginning, she was talking about the petition for redress of grievances. We did one in Canada beforehand. Canadians ran around like with their heads up their hind parts. I'm most of the time now spending most of my time talking to a lot of Americans. I mean, talk to chief of staff of congressmen that are taking these things forward and talking about it because they agree with the issues that are in there, and people are coming and bringing their information forward because they're fed up, right? And getting all kinds of people coming on because they understand that something is broken and needs to get done. This is an issue where, it did the same thing here. The judicial branch is the branch that's captured that is causing all of these problems, because when you don't have a court system, you cannot restrain the government short of revolt, right? And that's why the courts are there, so you don't have to revolt. The way the system is set up is so that you don't need to have civil wars. But when you take over the judicial branch, then you take away the ability of the people to restrain the government. So the people have to put a tremendous amount of public pressure on the elected officials to do something about it. And this is what has to happen.
Yeah, I agree with that. We often quote Gramsci and say that politics is downstream of culture, and I think the political mechanisms in Canada have been so thoroughly subverted that the most efficacious approach would be a citizens group or various citizens group, but have a sole purpose. My big thing is monetary reform. I think the supranational structures above our governments in the West have always been international finance. I think until we can address the root causes of the issue, there's no liberty. I don't think there's liberty that can be granted at a political level, considering they're all subservient to this supranational structure. And that might have been a sensational claim to make, even 3 or 4 years ago, but now it's very evident. There are bigger players, geopolitically, bigger banking players that are implementing a lot of these agendas through our political systems, just using them as a means to their end, essentially.
Yes, I agree that there's all of these groups that are working in here. We also have to look at this, that at the end of the day, those are people that are in those places. And the government positions, the bank, these are all human beings. And human beings predictably act the same ways under certain circumstances. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what those bankers are doing over there that are paying people to do whatever else, or whoever it is, it doesn't matter. Because if the people are there, they stand as a deterrent to whatever those people who are outside of the country or all these people with money are doing. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to self-preservation. Because it's like, who is going to do worse? The people over there or the people here that are in front of your face? And when you have people applying pressure, they know that eventually at a certain point in time, they're going to start thinking about consequences for their action. Because you cannot deny people their rights when they're consistently pressing for their rights. Because, and the channels that you use make a difference, but if they keep openly defying it, it's going to get worse for them, and eventually people are going to start to crack. This is basically what it is. It's who's got more will to do what they want is how this ends. Do the people have more will than the government? Is how this goes down. And right now we're showing that we're not. This has to change.
Let me so I'm going to give something. This is a little pessimistic, but it's just based on my observation. The difference between the Canadian system and the American system is that in the American system, they respond to the electorate much more than Canadian leadership does. And this creates a situation where, another way that you could describe that is that our leaders don't listen to us. So whatever we do, it doesn't influence their decision making the same way it does in the US. In the US, like, you can go lobby, you can pressure your congressman. For the love of God, they just had hearings on MK Ultra right now in Congress. Now, maybe it'll not go anywhere. Maybe it was just a puff piece, but they're actually doing that in the Congress. Whereas in our parliament, our chances of getting that are a lot less. I understand they finally did a hearing on the COVID victims. I don't know where that's going to go. They're having in-camera discussions. My point is that there is a cultural difference between the Americans, and I think this also stems from the fact that, as you mentioned, Dale, America, like, they see themselves as citizens, whereas we see ourselves as subjects. And if you see yourself as citizens, you understand, you've been told your entire life, no one is coming to save you. You have to take the bull by the horns. Whereas in Canada, it's peace, order, and good governance. Just be loyal subjects.
Yes, but peace, order, and good governance can only happen when you're still looking after the people. Because at the end of the day, you push anybody too far and they will revolt. Because what's happening here is, everybody should go back and study the French Revolution. Because if you don't, you'll have no idea of what's going on. Because every aspect of what happened in the French Revolution is happening now. And they are pushing people to the point of breaking and going berserk. You can even watch what they're putting out in the media and everything else like this is just to inflame people so that they will fight each other. And if we don't start, like, understanding what is going on, we're going to make the same mistakes. Like, if you don't understand history, you're doomed to repeat its mistakes.
So the American system definitely has some better measures for the citizens being enfranchised, and there is a cultural difference between Commonwealth nations and America. But I mean, we also had the Warren Commission. You know what I mean? That didn't really lead anywhere good. There's a lot of it that I believe is performative. So they have this MK Ultra panel, and it's like you say, will something come of it? Well, nothing's really come of anything else they've done with Congress. And that's just the truth. Like, that's why I cited specifically the Warren Commission. So, I mean, I think the problems lie slightly above that. But everything we're discussing about getting people on the same page, it requires solidarity. And the division, like you were mentioning, Dale, it's being fomented. I believe it's synthetic. I think the algorithms fuel the division. They're playing different groups off each other. And that's the biggest hurdle we have to overcome. If we're going to do anything, we have to unite people as opposed to dividing them. And the left-right thing is worse than ever. The left and the right absolutely hate each other. We're seeing extreme iterations of it with these Antifa types, and then we're seeing extreme iterations of the right with the white identitarian nationalist groups and all this stuff. Like it's not looking good for the people to get on the same page.
I'll kind of respond to that. Like, for example, the right to petition for redress of grievances, it comes from the Westminster parliamentary system. And the way the Americans brought it in was the way it was designed to work in the British system. And they codified it into their First Amendment. And it's the last thing in the First Amendment for a reason. Because when you take every step that you've gone to, the only thing that is left that you have is the petition for redress of grievances. And when that failed, the Declaration of Independence was written, and they revolted and kicked them out. Because when the courts fail and everything else fails, this was designed by the king so that if there was some extreme situation, like your neighbor is stealing your flocks and everything else like that because they're bringing French soldiers onto the shores to go march on London, well, if you need to go into the king to see that right away, then they let you in because this is an urgent matter. This has gone through our common law, and it is still protected by Section 2, but they don't use it anymore because they didn't want people to be able to do these types of things. But this is something that we need to go back and deal with it and say that we are not relenting until you yield. I don't care what you say. You're going to give in to our will because you are a servant of the people. And if not, there's the door. Because if we don't have that mindset that they're going to do our will or else, this is never going to go anywhere. And we don't need all of the people to do it. They need people to have the ability to do so, to stand up. Because going through what we're going through now is never going to work. Right? I want my country back.
Dale,
Yes.
Assume that the audience doesn't know what you're talking about, petition for redress of grievances. This is sort of your pet project. Can you explain what you're doing?
Yes. I mean, I wrote a petition, and it's not like the one where you get a bunch of signatures. It's not. It's fundamentally very different. And there's a specific form that you use for it. You write down your grievances, then you attach a brief, which explains what the issues are, and then you have some evidence that goes along with it. Then you submit that in there. The way that it works is that once you submit it to someone, the obligation rests upon every member of the parliament to bring that information, read the petition into the floor, put it on the public record, and decide what needs to be done with it. Like the way that they have it set up for these petitions that you sign, that's not the way it works. So a lot of the things is that the people now have to get the politicians to do what they're supposed to do, right? Because a lot of people don't know what to do because they've put a lot of these things out of practice. Because even in the States, I had to talk to people, chief of staffs of congressmen, that didn't understand the mechanism for dealing with a petition for redress of grievances. So we understand that a lot of this stuff has been gone away, but we have to put the pressure on them to do their duty. Because once it's read into the floor, then their duty's discharged. But the whole point is getting it there. Because once it's there, then the issues that we want to get dealt with the mechanism is there for dealing with it. Because this is demanding a public inquiry in Parliament, not just with government people, but with the public, and for investigation. Like we have one in Alberta, because provincially is where you get the criminal investigations. Federal government has no authority to direct investigations, but the premiers do. The attorney generals do, because the attorney general of Canada, he doesn't deal with the criminal aspects, even though they might have the federal crowns. They're actually not even constitutional, but that's another discussion. But the provinces in the Constitution says that they are responsible for the administration of justice in the provinces. So people can go in and take this forward and get them whatever their issue is, because everybody's issue is tied to the judicial branch being broken, and bring that in and take it into their local MP.
Do you want to go, JP, and then I'll follow up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious. I have a question. Like, what is the major obstacle you're facing? Is it just getting people on board, or like what is slowing down the process?
The major obstacle is getting people on board and the resistance that I'm facing, right? Like, I mean, there are more people that are supposedly in the conservative movement or whatever that have been cutting me off at the knees to do these types of things. For example, I'll give you an example. When I filed those criminal negligence complaints on July 3rd of 2020, it was an extremely significant thing. For example, with the engineering controls, because it created a weakness, a vulnerability in Canada and the United States, because the CDC gave out front-facing instructions to the public that they could never interpret, and expecting them to do this under a bunch of duress. This is literally how you kill people. Like, I mean, basic risk assessment 101, never give incompetent people incomplete instructions and expect good outcomes, which is what they did. Crying right off the board. So when I went in there, what they were supposed to do was to send this up to the National Division, which would then send this over to the CDC, to the FBI, and the Department of Homeland Security. And there would have been an investigation. The CDC was also the ones who were doing Operation Warp Speed, when putting this information out, helped necessitate Operation Warp Speed, because they gave something that people were doing wrong, and they had no hope of doing it right without understanding who they needed to call, and the average person, they didn't know. So this would have fundamentally changed the way things were. And since the complaint was open, there's no statute of limitations, right? All of the people who want people prosecuted, this is the mechanism on how they do it, because this will touch every aspect of the pandemic response. And all the people who got prosecuted would go back to that point where they should have investigated July 3rd of 2020. This is what we want, right? But we need the people to do this. And there's a lot of people who have a vested interest in not getting investigated. And that's the issue.
Do you have a follow-up, or you want me to go?
You can go, Peyman, if you're good.
So the closest person I know that's done something similar to what you're doing is Trevor Halsworth. He went through every avenue in our judiciary, and then finally he petitioned the United Nations, which is, like throwing a message in a bottle in the ocean. It's not going to go anywhere. But a tremendous amount of respect for him. He tried to do that the legal way. There's a gentleman in Nelson, Jamie, doing the same thing, and there's a whole bunch of them. Now, it's difficult to organize people, and now this goes back to essentially what you're talking about. People, not cooperating with you, frustrating you. If you go to people and let's say you got 100 podcasters or spacecasters, and you say, why don't we federate our efforts and let's effect political change? They will usually not do that, because they feel in their comfort zone on their space or on their podcast. But if you federate, then they might have to answer to somebody. That was the number one challenge I had when Andre Milosh, myself, and Timothy Knight, we tried to create something resembling a citizens movement. We couldn't get buy-in.
Okay, this is what I did in the United States, and it's here in Canada in principle. So when you look at the judicial branch, it affects everyone differently. For example, the people that were vaccine injured that can't get help through the courts, or the doctors that were persecuted through the courts. So I give them what is necessary to them and let them fly with it. The people who got their kids taken, I give them something. If somebody else, for example, is going through lawfare, I give them something else, for example, like the J6ers and so forth. So all the problems that we're seeing are a symptom of this branch being completely captured. This is why we're at where we're at. So I give the fundamental argument of the principle of what causes the issue. And whatever your symptom is, you take that and go with your group and run with it. And that's really how this is going to be, because you're never going to get everybody to agree on every aspect. But take what is in your best interest to deal with and run with it. So in that aspect, you don't have to worry about convincing people on all these kinds of things. It's like, look, you got harmed this way. You want to get help for this harm? You take this, go run with it. And then at the end of the day, we're all going to help push each other forward because everybody wants to work for their own interests, right?
So yeah, I mean, it's not a bad idea, really. I admire it in principle, and I don't want to come across as defeatist or anything. But the division, again, just to reference it, like I've never seen Canadians specifically so hyper polarized. It's funny where, you know, people are seemingly rational, and I'll speak with seemingly rational people, but once they can identify someone that they interpret as being from a political outgroup or part of the problem, they just hyperfixate on each other. And that's the biggest problem, is the division within the populace and within the electorate more specifically. And that's, again, one of the biggest hurdles we have to overcome. I hate to use a woke term in a positive way, but whatever movement comes would have to be some kind of more inclusive citizens movement. Well, so it's predicated on citizenship and not some specific tribe identity like conservatism or liberalism or ethno-nationalism or any of those other issues.
The way I look at this is, when people suffer harm is not a political issue. I don't give a damn what side of the political fence you're on. If you're being abused, like, that's not a political issue. I'm not going to sit down and say, "Oh, sorry, well, you got robbed. You're a liberal or some other or conservative, so you're not going to get help." That's not the way that works, right? Because in the position in the States, we've got liberals, we've got conservatives, we got people in between that are all on board with it because they're all having issues. So this is not restricted to just conservatives. I don't care who it is. If you have a problem with the government, you can support this because everybody wants to have the government that works for them. And anybody who says otherwise, I'm going to ask you, are you a communist? Because if you don't have a government working for the people, then what are you, right? But at the end of the day, we have to sit down and start. We have to start somewhere, and do something. And just sort of just touching on what you said there, JP. I think the biggest issue that we're having in this country for the identity politics is the racists. They are causing by far the most damage, because the fabric of the country is no longer the same as it was 40 years ago. And it's stopping people from coming together more than anything else.
So I got to jump in right quick. I agree with you, and I believe these are the most racist is the anti-racists. So anti-racism and this whole vilifying white people, colonialism, that had a reflexive response. That's what's directly triggering some of the white identitarianism that we're seeing right across the board. It's not just isolated in Canada. We're seeing it everywhere. And it's a reflexive response of a homogenous population that has been balkanized by radical demographic shift. So, I mean, they knew what they were doing. And I do believe that there is a them that have engineered societal collapse.
Of course,
and a lot of it is we're in the process of a dialectic, a problem, reaction, solution. And that's the broad one. They want civil strife, and they want us divided, and they want us divided on every metric available. And when I look at these algorithms, anyone with a nuanced opinion, anyone who actually has a pragmatic solution like what you're referencing with your movement, those people are deboosted. They don't want those people getting any action in the algorithm. They want the division. They want the reflexivity within this false dialectic, the left and the right, traditional, conventional left-right spectrum. So as long as they can parameterize the conversation within that, it's really hard to get people to look past that. And again, it's not just the left-right, it's the racism versus the anti-racism. And it's everything, man. It's the intersectionality Olympics. Everyone's trying to measure out how many systemic marginalized groups they belong to. It's just phenomenal. And it's worked exactly as it was designed to work, in my estimation, because it all comes from critical theory, then critical race theory, intersectionality, all comes from the Frankfurt School of Thought. And I think it was to destabilize homogenous countries. Like it was a political end, essentially. And we're seeing the late terms of that. We're in the latter stages of demoralization.
Yes, and this is true. Like these issues need to be addressed, and the race issue was definitely manufactured. Like I grew up in Canada, born and raised here, so I went from the country being like about 95%, almost 95% white, to where it's probably 60 something percent, right? Over a short period of time. And you started to see the radical, like, yeah, they did the multiculturalism in the 80s, but you didn't really start seeing the larger effects of it till closer to the millennium, right? To 2000. And then once you started to get past closer to, 2015, when Trudeau came into office, that's when it started to go through the roof. So there was a lot of racist mentalities. There's a lot of racist people. I'm not saying the majority, but there was enough to make people's lives hell. And then a lot of people didn't realize this. But then now they feed into this whole idea of those people that are there that are doing this stuff. And then now they bring in something to start provoking the rest of the people, because most of the people who aren't that way, they're not making the connection that there is a group of people that are definitely this way and terrible and creating problems. And then they just pit both sides against each other. So what they need to do is identify the people who are on both sides doing it, because there's racists of every ethnicity. I'm not sitting down and acting like anybody's worse than anybody. They're all equally bad. And I disagree with it 100% because it causes more problems than anything else. But those people need to be sidelined because they're not doing anybody any good. And the most people that I know, they don't care what you look like. They don't care. They want help. They'll go get help from anybody. How many people will care if they're drowning who saves them? Most people don't. And if you do, well, then too bad for you. But we need to get away from that. Go ahead.
Let's take it back to your petition for redress.
Yes.
How would you start this? I tried to start a citizen movement that was apolitical. It was not ideological, and it was grassroots. I couldn't gain traction. Dominic Cinelli, he tried to create the BC Prosperity Project. It kind of fell apart. There are so federating or organizing into one monolithic group is very difficult. There's a lot of freedom groups out there. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. No, I was just wiping my mouth.
Okay. Sorry. This is high quality podcasting here. There's a lot of freedom groups, BC Rising, Freedom Rising, and whatever. So what have you tried to do so far to get this message out? Like, have you tried going out to these freedom groups and getting them to take on your idea?
I haven't actually done as much in Canada because the amount of time that work it took to get things done. So I shifted focus to the States because I wanted to get what I sent into the MP, because the MP's office actually asked me to write a petition after they saw what I did for the Alberta government. They're like, write one and bring it to us. Right. So then I wanted to get one to the Congress as well, because I knew that the Americans were going to be more proactive on this. And I couldn't dedicate the time for how much effort it would take to what I would get in Canada. So I went to deal with the United States first. So I'm going to start coming back to doing things here in Canada, but we need to reach the groups themselves, not just the freedom groups, because when you get a lot of intelligent people together, you get a lot of ineffective issue, right? A lot of them, they are in a bubble. They don't deal with the execution, the practical aspect. And this is the difference between an engineer and a physicist, is where the physicist will sit there and dream up all this theoretical stuff, and the engineer is the guy who has to make it work and do something, right? And so you get a lot of guys with a lot of ideas, but then the execution is where the problem comes. And that's where I'd rather go to the people, like, for example, a vaccine injury. They're tired of they're dying, and nobody's really helping them. Will they want to pick up something where they can go and help themselves? Of course they will. or the people who got their kids stolen or whatever. They would want to do this. We need to start going to the people directly and forget these guys.
So this is essentially, this is a movement that would be tailored towards certain victim groups that had something done wrong to them by the state during COVID, and then they would form. So it's not one monolithic group. You're not looking for like a federated group. Is it more individually tailored to different groups?
Okay, like I said, the judicial branch being broken is the root cause. The different things like the vaccine injured, the people who got their kids stolen, whatever the case is, those are the symptoms of the broken system. So whatever your symptom is, you go to that group, give them what matters to them. They can go and do this to help themselves. You go to the next group, give them what matters to them, and they can go and help themselves. So each group can go and take what the angle that pertains to them and pick up and run with it, and then everybody wins. You don't have to go ahead and get everybody, because everybody's being harmed in some capacity, and they're not getting the help that they need, right? And so we want to give everybody the things that they need to bring this forward. I interviewed Helen Bruce and her lawyer Bathsheba, and Helen Bruce was investigating a potential, like looking into potential criminal negligence for what was going on with the babies and so forth. Now, when they prosecuted her, if they had properly did what they did when I brought these things forward, they would have never been able to prosecute her for what they were doing. Like, I mean, came out of the gate at the first, and because of what was done, the timing of what was done and what it was dealing with, the vaccines were downstream of this. All of these would have been properly part of a criminal investigation, and it should have, but instead they did otherwise. But we want people to get whatever they need to get done to pick this up and run. It's really the main point.
Let me just ask, let's put on our conspiracy caps right now. And if COVID was an operation, top down to centralized money and power,
Mm-hmm.
how are we going to get justice using the system that's the one that harmed us?
Okay, the system of itself is neither good or bad. It's not. It may be designed in a certain way, but it's not inherently good or bad. It's the people that operate within it. So what you need to get done? You have to get the people to bend to your will. Now, we're not dealing with average people. Like, yeah, some of them are incompetent, some of them are dirty, whatever the reason is, but the whole point is the outcome is that our will is not being done, we're not being heard, we're being marshaled. So in Canada, public servants have no right. And go to police officer, you can go and stick a camera in anybody's face. People can do this and put this out publicly so that everybody can see as this is going forward. Because we're doing this in the States. People are filming, going in and taking this information in. They're using sheriffs to serve it to their congressmen and so forth, so that they're putting the pressure on them. When these things begin to be known, it's going to put pressure on the MPs to act. And the ones that want to do right, they're going to get more leeway to do so because the population is saying we're having enough. And constitutionally speaking, this is basically the final straw. When you're coming to the government and saying, listen, the judicial branch is broken, nothing is getting done, you need to fix it, you need to create the laws and so forth to deal with this. You're saying to them that this is it. And everybody else will know, the entire world is going to know that this is it. Because what else are you going to do? If you can't sit down and get your government to repair itself, the only alternative is to like replace the government. They're leaving you no alternative. They won't correct themselves, and the people are coming together. And that's the point, that a lot of people can't, in our Western societies at this point, they can't allow that to happen. You can't start crushing the entire population for saying correct the government.
Go ahead. Do you want me to go?
No,
You okay? Go ahead.
No, I agree with it all, man. I really do. I think it's a good cause. I think it's pragmatic. And I think most people are stuck just describing or diagnosing the problems, as opposed to offering a solution. Again, there are some hurdles to overcome. That's getting people on board. Like not certain people that were wronged and have grievance. I mean, they're already inclined to push something anyway. But I'm talking about like the sleeping masses, the apathetic masses of the Canadian electorate, which is really required to put pressure on any of our institutions, would be a mass awakening with the people. And that's what these division operations, is what I feel they are, is kind of preventing. It's preventing people from seeing themselves with as things in common, as opposed to just ants in a jar being shaken.
Well, it's also there to distract from people from doing things that need to be done. And any grassroots movement does not start out with a large amount of people across the board. It starts with people starting to do things and taking action. When that action is taken, people see the action and then others will follow. And the more that people see people taking action to do something, others will follow, because many people don't know what to do. And all of this vision is to get people with these emotional responses, to keep them angry, to keep them occupied from actually what needs to be done. So the people that can start, even if it's the people who have been harmed, other people will start cluing in when they see these people going forward. Because this is the only way that it's going to happen. The grassroots has to be the one to do this, because even the independent media is still suppressing a lot of information, because most of it, whether they're directly or indirectly, they're doing the bidding of people outside of Canada. And that's just the sad reality of it, because certain stories don't get pushed because of the situation. But we need to have the grassroots do this. If the grassroots doesn't do this, it's not going to happen at all. We can't expect the big platforms or anybody else to do it. We need to go to the people directly and get them to spread this through the grassroots.
I agree with you. I actually like this petition for redress of grievances, if for no other reason, it just sounds cool. But it could just literally be a support group that gets together and says, yeah, we should go to our MP and demand blank. But I still think you either need to organize under one umbrella, or you need somebody in charge to go to these different organizations. And we will need some critical mass. I don't think, a dozen people over here and another dozen people over there for vaccine injury, another for police corruption. Because unless we hit that critical mass, these legislators have shown they're perfectly willing to overlook. The only thing they care about is if they're going to get voted out.
Well, yes, and that I agree with you. And we do need to get people together. And I'd be open to talking to anybody for them to understand what's going on, because I'm working with a number of groups in the United States that are picking up this and getting their groups to go in and do these things. Like I go in and I speak on their Zoom calls and stuff like that regularly to instruct them and so forth on doing this. So yes, I understand that you need to have grassroots groups, and I have others that are waiting in the wings to come in and help with once it gets to certain stages and so forth. But we need something out here. I have no problem doing that. The question is getting people to listen, or certain people are gatekeeping. And yes, and they're causing more problems than anything else.
So a lot of the independent media that you're referencing, like, people are incentivized by their own ends, and a lot of these individuals are audience captured. They've already tribalized. They make content that's vilifying one group and deifying another group, and that's kind of their bread and butter. That's how they get their engagement, and the engagement is incentivized by profit. So I mean, it's set up this perverse incentive structure that prevents them from taking risks and stuff. They're just serving slop to their followers, essentially. And I'm sorry, but that's the vast majority of people in this social media climate. They have no integrity. They're not looking for, to quote Nietzsche, they're not looking for truth. They're looking for comfort and illusions. And even worse with some of the independent players is they're looking to perpetuate their meal ticket, which is grievance for one group or another, right? Like that's what you see. I call it culture war grifting slop. And that's what most people push.
And I agree with what you're saying. This is why I went to these specific groups, particularly the vaccine injured and the people who have the parents who are having their children destroyed or stolen or whatever the case is. Because those people at those point in time, they don't care how it happens as long as it happens, because they're fed up. They're going to die. Their kids are in this horrible situation. So they're ready to go, and they will do what's necessary. The other people will come along while you equip these people to start. You can start teaching the other people at the same time, because you can't take the time to teach people and do nothing. You have to do action with the teaching and work with whoever's willing to do what's right. And I don't care if I could get like 20 small podcasters to come in that were on like all about on business to just save the country. I will work with them, because their audiences can go ahead and then get those people the information out there, and then we can start instructing the people and then get them to start doing it themselves, because we can't rely on the independent media that is, like you said, worried about their own bread and butter. We want people who are patriots.
You know, it's funny. Sorry to relitigate this, but JP, I was actually going to tell you to say exactly what you were just going to say right now. And the algorithm, which is it has a monetary incentive to get podcasters to get their audience angry. And when they get angry, you're just chewing through cycles because you're not doing anything productive. So that's one hurdle to overcome, right? So you go to these podcasters and you're like, hey, we have this idea for a completely boring way to take back the country. We're going to take these 100 pages and we're going to sign the back and we're going to petition. They'll be like, no, like I'm not going to make hundreds of thousands of dollars off that. No way.
No.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, the algorithm itself, I don't know how your growth has been, Dale, but once I started to get to the core of the issues, and I stopped looking at this left-right division, I started to try to kind of influence people to have a little more solidarity and look past the division. I've been invisible. It's like that's a new any nuanced perspective, or anyone who's talking about unifying people as opposed to just targeting a group to vilify. That's what the algorithm is. It's de-emphasizing that, while in direct, like the total antithetical, anything that's sensational and vilifying people, any group too, you could vilify, and you could jump in on this war with any particular group in mind. And as long as you're putting out like hyperbolous or sensational rage bait, you're making money. So, I mean, the perverse system that it's set up is one of the biggest problems, man, on social media.
Well, yes, but there are ways to circumvent the algorithm. And that's the whole point. This is why you need to push certain things through the grassroots and get people to manually do this, because eventually, after you get a certain critical mass, the algorithm will push it because of the sheer numbers. You can circumvent that, and this is what it's going to take to do the work, because I've always been like, I mean, I don't think there's any person that has a platform as long as I do that has the amount of suppression I do. I get no reach anywhere, and the only how I get larger reach is by bypassing, like circumventing the algorithm by working against it, right? Like, because I've got some posts that have like, I mean, 1 million views. I didn't get that just organically, right? So if you have the people that are willing to do things, you can get some at least reasonable growth that people can see it. And the more people that see it, the more people will come on. And we're not looking at going at the bigger guys. I don't care about anybody who's I don't care necessarily how big the person's platform. What I care about is their willingness to do what is right. That is the most important criteria.
I think you and I were having a conversation a couple of months back, and we're both like, yeah, these podcasters are useless. I guess you have to go to the ordinary rank and file people. They're more effective.
Well, yes, and some people have audiences and so forth. And this is why you want to go to certain people. Because when I watch what's happening here, a lot of the people in the media are responsible for the people being in the bad situation that they are. Because the media's job is supposed to be to expose the type of things that are going on. The things that are really mattering to the country, nobody's talking about them. A lot of people are living in effective slavery right now. You may not have the iron chains, but the chains of circumstance. And then now they want to charge you, what, $500,000 to move out of the country? What are you, nuts? Like, what is this? You're basically turning Canada into a slave camp that you can't escape, right?
A resource slash labor colony is how I've been characterizing it. You're right about the media, man. If you want to look at one group that could be directly responsible for a lot of this, it's the fourth estate. The media is a foundational pillar or a functional necessity for any type of democratic system. And even our constitutional monarchical system in Canada is a democratic system. So their role historically is to reduce the complexity of these bills and to essentially provide a digestible summation of this to the voting, to the electorate. So, I mean, that's the first group that was subverted. And what they do, they function in the same way as these algorithms do, to keep us fixated on a certain group and in a perpetual state of division. So the media is one of the more culpable groups in this whole dynamic, in my estimation.
Yes. And like, I wanted to come back to this about the women in politics. Because if a man attacks a woman, it's not the same way as a man attacking a man verbally. It's not. The moment you start attacking a woman, you're looked at as an aggressor and so forth. Even if she's in the wrong, they're going to automatically think a certain way, right? And this is done also by design. And when women in conflict situations, they respond differently. And I do a lot of work with human trafficking victims. And when men are trafficking women, they do not stand a chance. And it's not just because of the physical strength. It is the way our minds work. Women see things relationally. Everything to them is relationship. This is why when you talk to a woman, it seems like she's selfish because she's just talking about how things relate to her. But that's how they experience the world. Men see things differently. We look at the playing field and the risk. Is this going to kill me? Is that going to kill me? What's the outcome if I do this? This is the way we look at it because we're designed to be the protector. So we see things fundamentally different. So then when you put a woman in a position of power where she cannot be on the same playing field as a man in the way that they think, she's never going to be in the position where she can actually assert herself over how men can assert each other by mentally outwitting each other using the ways we strategize with each other. You're putting her in a situation where she cannot win in that situation. And a lot of the times the women will do what they are told because they want that position, but they don't see what the men do. And I see it happening all the time, even with Danielle Smith. She doesn't see what the men around her are doing. He doesn't. And when she does, it's too late.
Let me quickly address that, JP. I'm going to say some things that are not politically correct. I find it's very difficult for me to work with women, like in a professional setting, because every criticism I give, they take personally, and then I'm just like, all right, fine, you write the software any way you like, and I'll pay somebody else to do it again. And the other thing is, you're kind of talking about the differences between men and women, and I think you said earlier women shouldn't be in politics. I'm not saying they shouldn't be in politics. I just look at the urban centers, and everyone's gotten feminine. It might not even be the urban centers, it's Canada. Like, we don't have masculine men anymore that make tough decisions and draw a line in the sand. Like, you're not touching my kid. Now it's very emotion driven. If I do this and if I stand up for my kid, am I going to hurt somebody's feelings? Are people going to look at me and say that guy's a bigot? And that's a challenge that we're going to have to find a way to overcome.
This isn't about my argument. Fundamentally, isn't about women being in politics. This is the fundamental issue that I'm talking about. When women are in politics, they're getting exploited by men, and I see it happening all the time. Why would we put women in a position to be exploited? We're saying exploitation is bad, but we're putting women in places where they're going to be exploited, saying that you're going to be just as good as the men when you're not, and they're getting exploited. I see it happening in front of my face. It is disgusting. Just because you want to do something doesn't mean that you should. Should you go and put yourself in a position of exploitation, and then we say exploitation is bad? This is what I'm seeing, because men operate very differently. And like when I sit down and say with the trafficking issue, it becomes very evident. Women they don't stand a chance. This is how men traffic women. They're outthinking them by this way that men think in relation to this. They see the feel around them, where women are more focused on the relationship aspect of how that person are relating to each other. So this is why they don't stand a chance, and women are getting exploited. So when they go into politics, they're getting exploited. Why are we promoting this? That's not. It's not whether or not I think women should be in leadership positions. Don't get me wrong, but when you're putting them on the same level as men and expecting them to perform, that's exploitation. They're getting exploited.
So you're preaching to the choir with me, bro. I'm Catholic. I'm more traditional in my values, and I really am. I think it's a symptom of a sick culture when we actually have police women and we're sending women into combat. And it's not some kind of I'm not trying to be a chauvinist or a misogynist. I firmly believe that in an ethical regard, that it's a symptom of a sick culture to be sending women to do men's work. And I think leadership roles in public service are similar to that. I agree with it entirely. But the problem, and kind of what you were touching on, Peyman, is we've been collectively emasculated by the normalization of feminism in our cultures and in our institutions. And this was top down. This wasn't an organic occurrence for us. And I mean, it's like the way we're going now, the trajectory, it's like the devouring mother incarnate in the form of the state. And that's socialism. That's the devouring mother. And then they contrast that with the orderly father. And if you go too far on that paradigm, you end up with like fascism. It's virtually identical. So, I mean, it's a huge problem. And I don't think it was an organic occurrence. I think feminism, and you and I have spoke on this, Dale, you're more of an expert on this than I am. It has theosophical origins. It actually comes from satanic groups that wanted to destroy our culture. So, I mean, that's relevant, man. It really is. And a lot of people don't want to take it all the way back there, but I think it's necessary for people to understand the negative effect it's having.
Yeah, and Melke actually talked about Helena Blavatsky, how she was instructing people who were socialists and communists in America that introduced those ideas, because the ideas that they brought in them, they were married to things like Marxism, communism, and this hard socialism, which is completely against having any type of free society, right? And that's what happens when you break down the families. You need a dependency on the state, because the protection that a woman would get from her husband or family, she is now looking to the state to do this. And like I tell you, you cannot pay the state, you pay anybody to love you. You can't. So who is going to have a vested interest in protecting you? Your family who loves you, or some random stranger that's just being paid to do a job?
Dale, you're right. The family unit's been broken apart, and JP is also right. This has been going on for a long time, and it's top down, and this is like the end stage. So the three of us are having this great conversation here. If you have this conversation at a rooftop patio with some random person, they'll be like, "What the hell are you talking about? What do you mean? There's nothing wrong, you know?" But I just say that I compare cities to like communes, and people, not just women, people are married to the state. It's like a Muslim commune where they got like polyamory. All of these men and women married to the state.
Well, and it's true. And at the end of the day, all of these things are not going to get dealt with right away. That's not even really the point. The point is that we need to stop the bleeding so that these other things can begin to be revisited. And that's for the people to decide, but we need to be able to get there, because the government right now is overreaching. The as far as I'm concerned, the whole Supreme Court, they need to go. In Canada and the United States, well, some of the judges in the United States will keep, but the other ones, most of them.
Easy there with Clarence Thomas.
Oh, I said some of the judges in the United States will keep. The rest of them, they got to go, right? Like, I mean, all those women that were on there that just did this ruling that I'm gonna just stop the rant. But this is why, when you look at the issues, the Constitution was written by men for men, and it was done for a reason. It was done in the way that men communicated with other men. They were never designed for this. The men were to go home and teach their families about what they did, and they could explain those things. It's like when women talk with each other, my ears bleed. Like, I have to stop them to process from like what they're saying to something that makes sense to me. And if you talk to a woman like you would talk to other men, she's gonna give you a blank look because we communicate differently. These things are not taken into account. And this is how they end up changing things, by feminizing things and making it more tailored towards women, which this is not the way it was supposed to be, because men did this for other men. And this is where a lot of things are lost, because we communicate differently, we operate differently, and when you tell people that you're same, that's actually abusive to both men and women, because it gives you the worst of both, because we're not identical, and we can't function that way. We need women to be women, and women do the most critical job on planet Earth. Like, they help to shape world events when they raise their children. There is nothing more important on planet Earth than that. But they tell you that it's no longer relevant, or that you don't need to. And then the issue with the mass immigration, well, if people had more children, we wouldn't be having this issue, right? I can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm famous for that. I agree with you entirely, and I have a unique perspective on it. I was actually raised by a single mother, a single grandmother, and I had an older sister. Presently, I have a wife and a daughter. You know what I mean? I very much understand the differences, and I understand that I call them hens when they get together, but I know that would be perceived as chauvinistic, but hey, guilty as charged. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But the problem therein lies, and I've been characterizing it as, how do we put Pandora back in her box? How do we convince women that feminism actually hurt them? And it's not about liberty, because it's almost like, you know, the apple in Genesis, right? Or the forbidden fruit. It's like, you know what I mean? It's liberty. You want to be like man. You want to be like God. And they think that, you look at J.K. Rowling, who says so many based things regarding transgenderism, but she's a huge advocate for feminism without even realizing that that's where it comes from. That nurturing, devouring mother, that chaotic influence of the feminine.
This is what you said there. She says a lot of base things, but then she does things that are not. This is the difference. When you look at things, women go and talk and expect things to be done because they talk. The reason being is that men take that, what they ask for, and then they do something with it. We go out and actually are the ones who, men go out and build societies because they want something for their families. We literally do everything because of our families. When you start cutting men off from having families, they get less responsible, they become feminized, and they do all kinds of idiocy. Now, feminism helped spur that, because then they started to drive the women off to do themselves, because if the man needs responsibility for him to grow. Like, I grew up with 5 women in the household. I was single mother, 5 women in the household, and I have 2 daughters. Like, I get it. Like, I know full well that I am not like them at all. And that most of my family members were extroverted, and I'm not, which made it even worse. Right? So I get it. But we need to get the men back to start going back to where they need to go. And they need to start being the ones to make the changes. Women are there and they're awake and so forth. They know what to say to do, but they're not the ones that you want to be able to get into the trenches to do the dirty work. Because I'll tell you right now, the work that I'm doing, there's not a woman that can do this. I'll tell you this right now. Physically, she won't be able to stand up. Like my daughter she cannot tolerate what I'm doing, and she's 30 years younger than me, right? Like, no, not 30 years, sorry, 22 years younger, 23 years younger than me, making myself older than I am. But I mean, because of the things that we're dealing with. Now, there are things that women are doing that men can't do, but we need them to do where we need to go where we're strong. And this is the point. We want to win. I don't care about this or that. I want to put the best people in the best places to do the best job. Women are good at getting influence. Women are good at going out and getting information out and getting people to teach people about certain things. They're great on that. But when it comes to the conflict, you want men. When it comes to doing the dirty work, you want the men there to do that. And any man who wants to put a woman out to do that dirty work, I'm going to sit down and say, there's a problem with you. You want your wife or your daughter to go out and do that? Do you? Well, if you don't, then don't do it to someone else. Right?
Yeah.
I agree with JP. I think he asked rhetorically, like, how do you put that? How do you put Pandora back in the box?
Sorry, go ahead.
I think it's lead by example. So be the change that you want to be. And yes, you can go and you can go talk to people and try to change their minds. But if you find a partner, marry somebody who shares your values, homeschooling is a perfect one. Homesteading is another one. But you can't just like go find somebody who wants to buy a Gucci bag and wants to, go to an expensive gym and go to nightclubs every night. You're not going to change that.
That's fatherless behavior. That's a culture change, and it's going to change by men opting out, and then men getting the women that are doing the things that they want. Because women, they all want relationships. Women thrive off relationships, and women want. Go ahead.
I have a bit of a positive note. There's a reflexivity to this too. Like, we've gone so far counterculture that like having blue hair and tattoos is not an act of rebellion in our culture presently. It's conforming. It's more an act of conforming. So now you're seeing a return to traditional roots and religion. We're actually seeing a lot of people embracing Christian roots. Now I'm Catholic, and the church has a lot of teachings for young people. Like, that's the answer. That's what we've been detached from. I heard an analogy from a philosopher named Will Hepburg, and it's cut flower culture. We've detached with the secularism of modernity. We detached people from the roots of the religion, the soil that truly sustains us. And that's our stories. That's our biblical narratives. That's where we decode our morality from. That is the West. So, I mean, there's a return there. So it is a bit of a positive now that we've seen the degeneracy of moral relativism swing so far that where we don't even know what men and women are anymore, that I think we're going to see a natural correction. And we're going to swing back, because now the act of rebellion for the young man in high school is to pull his pants up, put a tie on, and go to church on Sunday. That's the ultimate act of rebellion in this current society.
Actually, you just triggered my memory for something when you mentioned the religion. I actually, this relating to the petition, we actually talked about it because every person that we had in the petition that was being persecuted were Christian. But specifically, I spoke about C8 and C9. This is where it has a lot of issues going on, because we put this in long before they passed. They need to go back and revisit this. And this is how the people can go ahead and push this forward, because religious persecution is the ultimate result that will happen because of it. And every Christian denomination, I don't care what it is, because I don't look at denominations, I look at people. The leadership, corruption, absolutely. I don't agree with that. But the average person, I don't care, right? I don't care what religion you are. I don't care what it is. If you're a law-abiding person and you want to do what's right, then I'm good with that. If you're part of the corruption that's part of the problem, I don't want to see your face, right? Like, repent or you're going to be dealt with. But they all have a vested interest in this, because we're losing our country, and people are going to be punished as a result of it. When the people that get out of favor, for example, Christians, who promote stable families and law and order and these types of things that are a natural consequence of following God, they go against the people who want lawlessness and purity. So they have invested. Go ahead.
It's astounding how much Canada has slipped. I came here from a Muslim theocratic country, and in certain ways they did things better there. Like, the state would never go into some public school and go to some random person's child and say, "Hey, Billy, do you want to cut your penis off?" the fathers would lose their mind. They would literally murder the guy, and I don't think they would prosecute any of those fathers. They'd be like, "What? This guy was mentally ill, saying these things to other people's children."
I agree. And go ahead. I can't hear you.
You should have let him talk.
It's a different setup than I'm used to too, so it goes away, so I can't visually see it. It appears when I hover over it. Yeah, it's about the biggest lie we could come up with. If we were to sit here and try to think of what's the biggest lie we could tell our children, it's that there's no difference between gender. Gender is a social construct, and it's fluid and it's malleable, and you can interpret it however you want. And furthermore, it's likely if you're having any problems as a teenager, it's probably just because you're not the right gender. And that's literally what's occurring across the public school system in the West. So again, it's kind of more of a top-down thing, but it's having a massive problem, man.
Yes, and I was talking to somebody in the States about this when it comes to children. They talk about the best interest of the children because they use this to take people's kids who don't conform to this kind of insanity. Now, liberty for a child. Most people don't understand how that works. The liberty for a child is for them to get the capacity in order for them to exercise their own liberties. That means the parents are the ones who are supposed to be protecting that child so that their development comes to be the best possible that it can, because the child has a right to that development. Now, when the state comes in and starts to interfere, then they're infringing on that child's liberty by altering their development. Because when you take a child away from a parent, you trigger some serious issues with that, developmental issues with that child, that are often not seen until much later downstream, and the child is unaware of them or unable to articulate them at the time until much later. So you can destroy a child for life based on what you do. So when they look at liberty considerations for a child, they have to look at the outcome downstream for what the consequence of their action is. So if you're going to take a child from the parent, you have to make sure that the harm being done to the child is going to be worse than the consequence of taking that parent. And this makes the threshold extremely high for taking someone's child, where it's like basically abuse and criminal activity. Because you don't like what somebody's teaching your kid is not a reason to take their kids, as they're doing this to go in and transition kids and other things like this, which are absolutely absurd. And first of all, they couldn't get a surgeon to do this if they looked at the liberty of the child, because you alter their development and they don't know what that alteration is going to do downstream. It's not constitutional at all.
I hate to point out the obvious, but I think from the government's perspective, that's not your child. That's the government's child. You just brought the child into this world and then you hand it off to the government.
That's because the government acts like they're the ones who grant us our rights. Our rights come from God. The government was created to safeguard their rights. It doesn't matter where you look at. Look throughout human history. Governments were created to protect people's rights because there was criminals who were coming to take them. So they formed governments to protect themselves. So anybody who tries to say otherwise, they're lying. You're a tyrant and a criminal, right?
So that's one of the biggest reasons why we've been subverted from Christianity in the West, and why it was top down. It wasn't an organic occurrence. It wasn't like we reached a point of technological advancement where we were like, the whole God and family thing, we don't need that anymore. We're going to have the internet. Like, we've got cable television. We don't need that. This was all happened with subversion actions of subversion through our media, television programming, through the school curriculum. We use a Prussian military model, critical pedagogy, the actual curricula itself. It's all infused to do what it's done, and that's where we are presently. And I think a lot of people are realizing that we've been lied to in profound ways. It's so disconcerting too to realize, like, we weren't just lied to, we were conditioned with lies. And the only answer, in my estimation, and maybe I'm biased because I am Catholic, is a return to Christ in some regard. It's a return to that soil I was referencing, the soil that sustains us. We get our morality from these stories. These stories are profound. They're not merely stories. That's like we conceptualize the world through a narrative form. These stories are everything to us, and they're the stories that made Western culture beautiful. And the Western democracies were not, that's a secular term. The Western democracies were historically known as Christendom. That's what other parts of the world called the West. It was Christendom. And we were Christian nations. And if we don't get back to that, man, there's no alternative in my estimation.
I agree with this. And like, it also gives a base of morality. Because when you look at the 10 commandments, you have commandments that were, the first 4 were for God and the last 6 were for man, how you live with each other. That is unalterable, right? Don't kill, don't commit adultery, don't steal, all these other things that are common sense things. You have that foundation. And when you have that foundation of how you live with your neighbor, then a lot of these issues disappear. And this is why Christian societies were the ones that were targeted, because we're like, okay, our moral compass comes from God. We're going to frame our laws to be reflections of that. And yes, even though the American founding fathers, a lot of them were not Christians and so forth, and some of them were all different types of things, they had to still create laws because the predominant society were Christians, right? And then the West developed this way. And we need to go back to sort of having that common ground of morality, because when you don't have any type of moral compass, and you're taught that you're no different than your dog who's licking its balls and so forth and going and eating its vomit, like, we can't operate that. We don't operate that. We understand, and we need to have boundaries.
I just I want to give a functional description of what God is, just for people that are maybe secular or whatever. If you break up the family unit, then the rights that came from the responsibilities of the parents has to go somewhere. So if you don't have a husband that's protecting the wife, that protection will drift towards law enforcement. If you don't have a father and mother educating the children, that will drift to the public education system. If you don't have a mother that's providing for the food, and I don't mean just going to the grocery store, I mean, making things from primary products, maybe pickling, jarring, whatever, buying some flour, well, that's going to head over to the food supply that's provided by the state. There's a secular capturing of God.
And if you don't have God in your culture for morality, then you have a big government that has to serve the function, right? It's like a small God, big government, big God, small government. And that's the way it works. People would adhere themselves to a moral basis, and people don't understand morality. Secular people can't. They can't grasp such a notion. That's why moral relativism is so prevalent. You require an ontological basis for any philosophical claim. For any claim of morals, you need an ontological basis to make that claim. So that's a big problem, and it's the philosophical illiteracy is phenomenal, and that's one of the things they don't teach you in school. The 2 biggest things that they don't want you to know about is philosophy and economics. So, I mean, that goes to tell you something right there, right?
Yeah, because economics, it's all manipulated, as you can see with what they're doing now. But yeah, I agree. I agree that we do need a moral compass, and without God, you don't have one. Because if, at the end of the day, God is basically who puts us here, right? If you believe that we are the final arbiters of truth, then I'm God, because I determine what's truth. No, God determines what's truth. He determines what's right and wrong, because if I do this, it's whatever I want at any point in time. And what happens when that happens? Look at the world. This is what happens.
Yeah, God is the logos. That's where we get our morality from. And that's again, it's basic philosophy or theology. But yeah, that's the big problem. And that's what it kind of links back to what I was saying earlier, because we were doing a lot of analyzing different systems. Oh, and the American system and comparing it to a monarchical system or a Commonwealth system. The problem lies at the root. And we've been severed from our roots. We used to have integrity because we used to have belief in the morals of Christianity. And we used to know that there were bigger consequences to face for deviating from morality. And until we can get back there in some actual tangible regard, I don't know if we could fix it with systemic changes. I think the big thing is we need to make moral changes. And I'm praying, and I'm sincerely praying, that this is starting to be the mass awakening. Like, you know what I mean? And a lot of people in the West, like I was saying, they are coming back to God. So that's really good.
I agree with you. And I think that the moral change goes along with the systemic change, because a lot of what I'm doing is based on my Christian beliefs of being merciful to others and helping others and showing love to others, even though it may be at a sacrifice. Because what did God do for us? He gave up everything so that somebody like me could not have to go and burn in hell. Like, I mean, right? When you think about that, the kind of sacrifice with who God is and what he did, and he didn't have to do it. Like, I mean, what happens with people with tremendous power? They're evil. They go ahead and do the worst things, but he didn't do this. So when I sit down and begin to think about it, this is why I do what I do, because I agree with what I see him doing. It makes sense. And so when people will see these things, yes, the return to religion is also going to be spurred about by doing what Jesus did, where he met the needs of the people and he relieved the ills of the suffering. And this is what we are trying to do, to get people to understand that there is a God that loves you, that does these things, because this is really what he wants for people. Because if they do that, then they're going to be like, hey, that's really not so bad, because they had a bunch of people that were very evil that made Christianity look bad, and they like to point at that. And actually, the people that are those people that are Christians, that are call themselves Christians, that are not, that do all this wickedness, and the people on the, for example, the ones on the right that are Christian and conservative that are evil, they're no different than the people that are the lunatics on the left with that are doing all of this nonsense, because they're feeding off each other and then destroying everybody else in between.
So to put it in secular terms for Peyman, because Peyman's more of a secular individual, and a lot of the audience potentially is too,
Yes.
is we need morality to be instantiated in something metaphysical that we can't alter. It can't change with the times of modernism or postmodernism. These are our values, and they come from God. So just think of it in a functional regard. Forget about having a faith or a belief in any particular dogma or anything like that. Just think of the functionality of that, what that serves a society. It's an absolute necessity, because the alternative is moral relativism. There is no truth. Dale has his truth. Peyman has his truth. I have my truth. And we're all our own gods, right? That's the Nietzschean ideal, the Übermensch, the will to power, how mankind goes on after God. And it was very flawed. Nietzsche was a brilliant man, but he was wrong. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's an absolute necessity. We require that for a cohesive society. We all can't be our own Übermensch, because we have to live together in a cohesive regard. And morality being instantiated in a metaphysic like religion, in an ontology, I mean, that's the foundation for it. So it's a necessity. And again, I point to people's philosophical illiteracy, that they can't understand that. They think I'm primitive because I have a religious belief. They think I'm a primitive person.
No, I get it. Sorry, I just found that funny. Go ahead, though.
Go ahead, Peyman.
Oh, I was going to say that if we were going to go any longer, I'm going to have to go grab a beer. I'm getting the shakes.
Yeah, I'm coming towards the end of my time allotted.
Yeah.
I got to get supper ready.
Yeah, we're gonna wrap up here pretty quickly. I just wanted to say something for people to understand. Think about the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution is supposed to be unalterable. It's supposed to mean the same thing that it does at the time the Constitution is written. The principles are there that should be able to be applied to any situation, not interpret the meaning of the Constitution to be something different. This is why you're seeing people interpreting things differently rather than applying principles. Because judges interpret how the law is applied or the Constitution is applied to a law to make sure that it stays the same as the Constitution. The Constitution is never supposed to change. It's like the meter. That's always going to be a meter, whether it's today or 1,000 years from now, that you have the same measure. That's exactly what we're trying to do. So,
can you imagine if the engineering departments go so woke that they say our measuring tape can identify at any distance that it wants?
Exactly it.
It's made of silly.
That's exactly it. It can't function. Now, but when you do that with a country, it can't function either.
This is where we are.
Exactly. So before we go here, let's get your final thoughts. You want to start with you, JP?
It was a great conversation, Dale. You and I have had several of these now. We always have great conversations and get on a lot of topics. I really like what you're doing with this. And I hope you all, I wish for you all the luck in the world. It's nice to see people coming up with pragmatic and creative solutions and trying to push that, as opposed to perpetually diagnosing the problems, which just leads people to fear. I try to do the same lately, which is new for me. But yeah, it was a pleasure to come on and talk with you. And thanks for having me.
You want to tell people how they can reach you and how they can find you?
Certainly, yeah. I'm at Semper Veritas X on X, and I have a YouTube channel called Dumb the Wiser.
All right. Maybe.
Also, we do a morning podcast at 10 a.m. Eastern, Monday to Thursday, JP and I. It's called Politics with Peyman and JP. You can find it on his YouTube channel or on mine, inlayterms.substack.com. My final message, going back to what we were talking about earlier, like how do we get around the people that maybe block us or they're not interested in helping? Find people that are good human beings. There are a lot. I'm going to name drop one, Esme V of Women's Sex-Based Rights. She's not doing it through hatred or vitriol. She's doing it, one person at a time through love and care and compassion. And hard work. So you find somebody like that, hold on to them, foster that relationship, and just ignore all the other naysayers and the negative Nancys.
Yes, and I agree. And a lot of the stuff that I'm doing is to help people who are being abused as well. What I will say here is everybody give these guys a follow, check them out. Their links and so forth are in the description. If you're watching on Rumble, Facebook, or Rumble
OnlyFans.
No, YouTube, because I recently started to go back on YouTube because, we've gotten channels kicked, so we'll see how that goes. But give them a follow and check them out. I'm going to close here with a prayer, and then we'll see everybody again. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love, grace, and mercy. We thank you for the hope that you have given us this day and for putting us in this situation to do what we can to help others and help our men and the women to come together to rebuild our families, our churches, and our community, and our nation, and to protect the children and help to protect the liberties of others is my prayer in Jesus' name.